the Royal Society is absolutely right to be calling for a review of post-16 education. And how, as so often, business and science have from different perspectives arrived at many of the same conclusions. Today is no exception. And above all, that deep connection that exists between inquiry, that is the art of finding out, and enterprise, which is the art of doing business, must and can be renewed in this day and age. So last month, the historian Adrian Tinniswood published a brilliant book about the Royal Society. And the book traces the Society's origins in Restoration Britain, a long and very proud history, and explains how at a moment of national upheaval, some of the greatest minds of the age came together to pursue a new kind of knowledge. It was an approach to uncovering truth, not through dogma, diktat, or decree, but through experience, experiment, and free inquiry. And it was the beginnings of the modern scientific method, such an important moment in our history. And yet, as Tinniswood's book records, it wasn't merely a desire to acquire knowledge for its own sake. The founders of the Royal Society were moved by the conviction that improvement of knowledge would lead to improvements in trade, in commerce, and in manufacture. And they were absolutely right. The Royal Society supported new navigational tools which made possible the growth of global trade in the 18th century. And that relation between knowledge and commerce is just as strong today. The Royal Society's Entrepreneurs in Residence scheme, for example, it matches business people with cutting-edge industrial science, research, and innovation. And of course, the relationship isn't just one way, and that's the beauty of it. One of our members, Tata, is today investing millions in Royal Society's project to develop young scientists. But I mention all of this not just because it's a good story, though I think it really is a good story, but because it's so relevant. And if I can make a bold claim, I predict that when historians look back on our era, the era we're living in now, they will see that we are going through a time of as great a change and upheaval as the era in which the Royal Society was founded. Yes, of course, there is Brexit, but there is so much more. We are undergoing a tidal wave of change in every fibre and piece of fabric of our society. And if we are going to navigate those waters, we are going to need that free spirit of inquiry to be renewed and revitalised. And I think if I can talk now from my role at the CBI, and as Venki said, we speak for 190,000 businesses across the UK. And where I see the power of this change at work most effectively, it is in the world of work. There are three main areas where I think we are seeing extraordinary change. First, there's our increasingly globalised economy, which means that our employers, customers, and competitors are as likely to be based in the next continent as in the next town. Where work was once concrete and tangible, perhaps about making a particular product in a particular place, it's now increasingly conceptual, it's increasingly mobile. Now, the interconnectedness of the world is going to continue to deepen, whatever Brexit eventually delivers for us, and it has created massive opportunity. But I think we do know, and Venki alluded to this, for many in our society, it also creates risks. As a society, we must be equipped to meet them. The second huge area of change in the world of work is that we must not underestimate the scale of the demographic change we are undergoing. And it is in thanks, of course, in large part to the genius of medical science that over the past century, every 4 hours, life expectancy has increased by 1 hour. This has huge implications for the world of work. As recently as the mid-1980s, only 56% of over 50s were still working. Today, it's over 70%. A third now expect to keep working past their 70th birthday. I haven't quite worked out what I think about that yet. Many alive today can expect to spend a decade, perhaps 2 decades, longer in work than their parents did. Now, this, of course, can be an incredible opportunity to do and achieve more, but only if we enter those extra decades with the skills we need. Not least because of how fast the workplace itself is changing, and that's the third point. We're used to hearing about the rise of automation, machine learning, and AI. The Royal Society itself has done a huge amount of work in this area, and it is truly excellent insight. But I still think we haven't realised the depth and pace and scale of change we are about to undergo. So most estimates say that between 10% and 30% of jobs will be affected by automation, and actually that's a number that we at the CBI have used regularly. But I have to say, I'm beginning to think that that is a wild underestimate. So last month, the CEO of IBM, Ginni Rometty, said that it won't be 10% or 30%, it will be 100%. Every job is being affected by automation in one way or another. Now, of course, some are very pessimistic about what that means for employment. There is a view that goes right back to Karl Marx, who devoted an entire section of Das Kapital to the strife between workman and machine. Now, his predictions were wrong, in the longer term at least. The machinery of the Industrial Revolution ultimately created jobs, and they lifted their quality as well. But this time, we really cannot afford to be complacent. Now, last year, Andy Haldane from the Bank of England warned that the rise of the machines that can think as well as do are a much greater threat. And if we are to avoid that threat, he said, the fourth industrial revolution must be matched with a skills revolution. We could not agree more. Now, there are some early, I think, really encouraging signs. So Deloitte has worked out in the last 15 years, automation has helped create 4 times as many jobs as those lost. And as importantly, as automation takes on lower skilled tasks, the labour market has shifted in favour of higher skilled work. And on average, each job created is paid £10,000 more than the lower skilled jobs they replace. That is very good and important news. And our own research shows that almost 80% of employers expect to increase the number of higher skilled roles in the coming years. So new technology can be a tremendous good. But all of these changes taken together, globalisation, the decades longer we will spend in work, and the need for higher level skills, they have profound implications for how we should educate people before they enter the workplace. Absolutely profound. For a world that's more dynamic, more competitive, more fluid, and more global. And of course, it's precisely these facts we are responding to in today's conference, and why the Royal Society is right to call for a review of our education system. In the business world, we've reached many of the same conclusions. Because gone are the days when we could expect teachers to give people all the skills they need in their careers. Indeed, if those days ever were with us. Now we have an economy that increasingly values creative thinking and broader skills such as problem solving. We need people to go on learning throughout their careers, who see that the division between education and work can no longer stand. And I'm pleased that the government too has begun thinking along these lines. And they've already moved the age at which a young person can leave education or training from 16 to 18. And in a speech last week, the Education Secretary acknowledged that character is as important as qualifications. That young people do need the skills to deal with setbacks and focus on long-term goals. And the truth is that over the past 10 years, as many of the CBI's member businesses tell us, the curriculum has narrowed and it hasn't broadened. As Venki has just said now, the average range of subjects studied at A-level is now fewer than 3 per pupil, and that concerns businesses greatly. And this is despite many other countries moving towards a broader, more diverse and more balanced curriculum. At the moment, we are just not keeping pace. And so in the coming months, the CBI will publish a report on what skills employers will need in the future and how we educate for the modern world. And the partnership that we're developing with the Royal Society will be incredibly important to that. But I think we can begin that conversation right now. It's already started, and it's right to ask, as some have in recent days, for instance, not just whether A-levels are anything like broad enough, but whether GCSEs are even necessary anymore. In a world where few employers even ask for GCSE results, are there better ways of assessing schools? Why should we require pupils to cram for a set of exams which feel increasingly anachronistic? Perhaps a relic of an age when people left education for good at 16. That is no longer the case. And if we were to move on from GCSEs, could we not use that space in the timetable to teach those broader skills? I was at a fascinating dinner last night where we talked about the importance of learning money and financial skills. There's no space in the curriculum. There are so many other things we could be teaching. So what if we provided a curriculum that instead of narrowing our horizons as we get older, it widens them? It fosters skills such as creativity, resilience, communication, problem solving. Venki mentioned many of the same ideas. And again, this is something the CBI will be looking closely at over the coming year. But I think there are a couple of other things before I close that I think we need to look at. If we're going to be spending longer in work, we should surely spend an equivalently longer time in preparation for work, especially when that work will be higher skilled. So it's right that in principle, no young person ever leaves education or training before the age of 18. That is right, we have that commitment, and it's helping to work in terms of the skilling of our young people. But in practice, that extra 2 years is very rarely enough. So at the CBI, we're looking at whether the government should give people the entitlement, not the obligation, but the entitlement to an extra year, a level 4 qualification that fills in that gap between that 16 to 18 period and the university education, the kind of hourglass that we have now. It could be the equivalent to the first year of an undergraduate degree, and not necessarily in academia. It could be in technical skills, perhaps an extra year in an apprenticeship or technical education, an idea we really think is worth exploring. And then just my final proposal. I've already said how much business gains from education. It is a profound and fundamental relationship. And I've talked about the vital link between inquiry and enterprise. But it's surely also right that business itself should make its own substantial contribution. We too have a responsibility to give young people the experiences of work that they need early in life. We can and we should be involved in our local schools, and many businesses already are, because we know that young people who have at least 4 interactions with business or school, at school, so meaningful interactions with business, are 5 times less likely to be unemployed. I think that is a staggering and powerful statistic. And we've been proud of the role that business has been playing in shaping the new T-level system, and how over the past year we've made serious progress in reforming the apprenticeship levy. But business leaders tell me all the time that we want to do much more. Perhaps lending support or training to new head teachers who are expected to move seamlessly and easily from a teaching role to one that is more akin to being a CEO of a large and complex organisation. Or even getting involved in setting up schools under the government's Free Schools programme. Both the need and the scope for action is huge. And we want at the CBI for businesses to grip this with both hands. So in the coming months, the CBI will publish a practical toolkit about how businesses can get involved in education in new and meaningful ways to deepen the skills revolution our society needs. So to conclude, I'd like to return to Adrian Tinnis's super book I mentioned at the beginning. It ends with, I think, a really good question. Does the Royal Society still have a role to play in the modern world? He then does answer it, by the way. He says, of course it does. There was so much to learn in 1660, and there is more to learn today. And that is absolutely true. As the frontiers of knowledge expand, the scope of discovery expands with them. And if we are to keep pace with our changing world, it will be because we revitalise the links between inquiry and enterprise. And it's events like this where business and the true brilliance of science come together that will help ensure that we succeed. Thank you very much indeed. And I'd be delighted to take a couple of questions if people have them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. So, Sharon said she's happy to take some questions. I can't believe there aren't any after all that electric introduction. Thank you so much.
Mark Wakefield from IBM.
Hi.
There are some roving mics, they say. If you just hang on for those.